Hi everyone, it's Cass. Welcome back to my channel, What Cass Read. Today I'm going to bring you my spoiler-free review of The Black Prism, written by Brent Weeks. I feel like a lot of people have been picking this book up lately, and that's because this is the first book of the Lightbringer series. Book number 5, the final book of the series, just came out, so more and more people have been picking up this series. So that's where I want to begin. This is book number 1 of the Lightbringer series. This follows two different brothers. We have Gavengyle and Dazengyle. In this world, there is one figurehead called the Prism, who wields the colors of the spectrum, of the light spectrum. He serves as both like an emperor and a religious figurehead within this world. We have both Gavengyle and Dazengyle to both have the powers of the Prism, something that doesn't happen ever, and they end up going to war with one another. This is just the history of the world. So the book begins, 16 years after the end of the Prism's war, and one of the brothers, Gavin, has won. He is the elder brother, and he's just trying to maintain peace within the continent, the 7 different satrapies. One of the satrapies doesn't agree with the way things are run, and they have been setting fire to the countryside. Gavengyle must maintain peace and order, and within this timeline, he finds himself to be the father of a bastard son named Kip. He's desperately trying to keep that secret, and events take off from there. So the first thing I want to talk about is the world building. Now, I mentioned this color system, magic system, when I was describing this book, because you really can't talk about this series without talking about the magic system, but you also can't really talk about the magic system because it's a very hard, complex magic system to explain. The magic system is based off of color. All of the different colors within the spectrum, people who find themselves within the power of these colors are able to see these colors, and they're able to take the color from their surrounding environment, draft it within themselves, it's called drafting, and then expend that power outward. They're range from yellow to red to green to blue to violet. There's various different rules. There's various different traits that each drafter has. And you can be within, most of them are going to be called a monochrome. That's going to be one person in power of one color. You might have a bichrome, so they might be able to draft 2 different colors. And that's where we find ourselves with the Prism. So the Prism is this religious and emperor type figurehead in this world because he is able to draft all of the colors within the spectrum. And for a first book in a series, I'm really interested to see how we encounter the different uses of these drafters throughout the whole series. This series, like I said, starts off at the end of a war, but more trouble could be brewing, more political trouble, more wartime trouble could be brewing. So we might be seeing more and more drafters come out of the woodwork. So I said that there's 7 different satrapies, so most of the colors come from different sections of this continent within the different satrapies. So you might have one satrapy that is very geared toward the green drafters, one that's geared toward blue drafters, and they all send their extremely promising young drafters to the Chromaria, which is this center of learning, and it's this university setting where students go and learn to wield their powers, both as a monochrome, both as a bichrome, etc. Some of the students are very wealthy. They come from wealthy satrapies and are able to sponsor themselves, but some of the students are also extremely poor and have to find an outside sponsor who is willing to sponsor their education at the Chromaria. At this stage in the book, we don't get so much of this religious fervor around the Prism. It was an obviously large part of the world because that's why 2 different groups of people went to war with one another. They really backed one brother Dazen versus one brother Gavin over each other. So there's this whole history that we get right towards the beginning, and as the book plays out, we uncover more and more of this historical battle. But with the new battle looming, the new drafters coming into place versus the old drafters, I felt like this world was extremely well built, and that was probably my favorite part about this whole book. So next, I want to talk about the characters. We meet several different characters. I had already mentioned Gavin and Dazen. They're both the brothers who went to war with one another in the Prism's War. Gavin came out victorious, and he ended up killing his brother Dazen. We see him, and he's kind of left with the pieces of this empire that he just doesn't really know what to do with. He knows there's factions of Dazen's people still out and about, but it's not something that really troubles him. He has lived longer than any Prism has ever lived. We don't find many long-standing Prisms, and that tends to be at the beginning of the book Gavin's like biggest conundrum, is that he's approaching this like really pivotal year, this year that would make him one of the longest living Prisms out there, and he feels like there's so much to his life that he hasn't given back. He wants to do like one really great act of good per year, because he's like, there's kind of no point to me doing much of living anyway, because I'm all powerful and I know my life is gonna run out soon because I can't have all this power and live forever. So he finds himself like at the beginning of this book to be like a really bored character. And so when things really start taking off with this like rebellion taking place with him meeting his bastard son, it kind of like brings his mind into gear. He finally feels like he has a purpose again versus just being this all-powerful Prism. Dazen Guile, we get a lot of like bits and pieces about Dazen's life, because at the time that we hear about Dazen, he is long dead. The things that we hear about him was that he was like the passionate one versus Gavin was the very rigid rule follower, like a really great older brother versus younger brother dynamic. And I really love sibling dynamics like that, so I really enjoyed, even though we don't see a lot of Dazen on the page, I really enjoyed that as well. Our next main character that we meet is young Kip. So Kip is the bastard son of Gavin Guile. We meet him as his village is burning to the ground. He finds himself outside his village at the time, and then all of a sudden this group comes and attacks and burns his village to the ground. He ends up being the lone survivor to this attempt on the village life, and it turns out he's much more important than he thinks he is, and that's because he finds out that his father is the Prism. Kip is very young. He's like 15 or 16 years old. He's very not sure of himself. He is overweight. That is a very big part of his character that comes up quite a bit. He's a 15-year-old boy, so he thinks constantly about girls, and that tends to distract him a lot of the time. So we've got this young guy who doesn't know which way from where because his village was just destroyed, and he finds himself in knowledge of this like really powerful secret, but he also feels like really like insecure because he's overweight. And so he just kind of like blunders through this like new environment, this new setting in his life, like that it's completely out of his control, but like it's so funny because like he could be worrying about that, but instead he's worrying about how he feels like weird and jiggly, and like he walks around and just thinks everybody is staring at him because he's overweight. It did like beat it across the head like one too many times for me, but he's quite funny. He's just like so focused on himself when there's like so many things going on. We also meet a young woman named Karis Whiteoak, and Karis knew both Prisms, knew both brothers, knew both Gavin and Dazen, and she is this extremely powerful woman who like decided to take a step back and make herself a part of this Black Guard, this elite warrior guard to the Prism. She was engaged to a very powerful man at one point, and now she's not, and she's living with those choices, and also trying to balance what she knows about Gavin and Dazen, and what she knows about the outcome of the war, and what she thinks she knows about the outcome of the war. So overall, the plot I absolutely loved. The characters, for me, the strong point was that sibling dynamic was also Karis Whiteoak dealing with the events of her past and how that shaped her as a woman now. And then I'll be interested to see how Kip moves forward, just because he's so insecure, and I'm wondering like if he'll get any type of swagger at all. But he's still like really likable, but like not likable. So I did end up giving this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. The only reason why I didn't give it a 5-star was because I felt like all of the talk within like Kip's head was just a little too much for me, just like a little too many times. He talks about how overweight he is, he obsesses about women's bodies, he obsesses about what he would do to a woman if he ever found himself in the company of a woman who actually liked him, but why would they like him? Because he's overweight. Like all of that over and over again. That is the only reason why I docked it down half a star. Otherwise, this book was extremely well written. There are so many twists and turns inside this book. I have a video coming up talking about some of my favorite fantasy tropes, and this has 2 of my favorite fantasy tropes within this book. Some of that just being like villains aren't always who we think they are. The whole sibling dynamic is something that I really enjoy, and just the twists and turns. I thought I was reading one book to start off, but as soon as that first twist hits, I found myself to be reading a completely different book, and it kept me going. I thought I was going to DNF it because I thought it was just going to be like really, really standard. But as soon as that first twist hits, then it was an entirely new story and I absolutely loved it. I think you'll definitely want to give the Black Prism a chance if you're looking for something that's just a little bit different in the fantasy world, but also has like a really complex magic system. If you don't like complex magic systems, this one might be a little too complex. I don't even know if I properly explained it. I don't even know if I understand it entirely at this point, but I tell you what, I really did enjoy it. So yes, 4.5 out of 5 stars, The Black Prism, written by Brent Weeks. Okay, that was my first review that I've done in a while, if you couldn't tell, but I hope that you enjoyed. Let me know what you think about The Black Prism in the comment section down below. And of course, you can also find me on my social media if you want to talk about the book there. I'm on Instagram and Twitter. It's at whatcassread, the same as this channel, so it should be super easy for you to find. My Goodreads link is down below, as well as the Goodreads link for my book club, the Big Ass Book Club, that is down below. And you know how these videos end. I'll talk to you later. Bye. Running down to the riptide, taken away to the dark side. I'm in the middle.